Can you call my mom? Annie asked, rubbing her trembling hands together. Ethan Whitmore stopped with one hand still resting on the open door of his black sedan. It was nearly midnight, and the cold wind swept through the almost deserted streets of downtown Chicago. He had just finished a long meeting and wanted nothing more than to get into the car and head home. But the young woman's voice behind him made him turn around. Annie stood several feet away beneath the light from a convenience store. One shoulder of her work jacket was torn. Are you talking to me? Annie nodded. Yes, sir. I'm sorry to bother you. I just need to call my mom. Ethan looked at her, then at the dark stretch of street behind her. Where's your phone? Annie swallowed. It was taken. Ethan immediately became more cautious. Talkin'? I just got off work. I was walking toward the bus stop when two men stopped me. They took my bag, my wallet, my phone, everything. Annie lightly touched the torn shoulder of her jacket, then quickly lowered her hand. Ethan studied her for several seconds. I'm sorry. I can't help you. He turned back toward the car. Annie's face fell. Please, sir. Ethan stopped but didn't turn around. There's a store right there. They wouldn't let me use their phone. Then find a police officer. I will. Annie's voice caught in her throat. But first, I just want my mom to know I'm okay. Ethan turned his head. Annie immediately took another step back, afraid he might think she was trying to get closer to him. I'm not asking you for money. You don't even have to give me your phone. She opened both empty hands so he could see them. I'll stand right here. You can dial the number yourself and keep the phone in your hand. I'll just tell you the number. Ethan said nothing. Annie backed away even farther. I won't come near you. Her voice grew quieter. I just need my mom to hear my voice. Ethan looked at her. You understand how suspicious it sounds for a stranger to ask to use someone's phone this late at night, don't you? Annie lowered her head. I do. Someone could grab the phone and run. Or try to get into an account. I understand. And you're still asking? Annie looked up. Her eyes were red. But she fought to keep the tears from falling. Because my mom is waiting for me. Ethan remained silent. Every night when I get off work, I text her to tell her I'm on my way home. If I'm 5 minutes late, she starts calling. Annie bit her lip. Tonight I'm almost 40 minutes late. She turned her face away and quickly wiped the corner of one eye with the back of her hand. She might already be calling hospitals. That sentence made Ethan stop seeing her as merely a stranger asking to use his phone. He remembered Emily when she was younger, calling him after missing a train just to tell him she was safe. At the time, he had scolded his daughter for not calling sooner. Now he would have traded everything he had just to hear her voice one more time. Ethan reached inside his coat. Annie looked up. He pulled out his phone. I'm not handing it to you. Annie nodded immediately. You don't have to. I'll make the call. Yes, sir. You stay right where you are. I promise. Ethan unlocked the screen. What's the number? Annie opened her mouth, but it took her a moment before she could speak. Then she slowly gave him each digit. Ethan entered them. Say it again. Annie repeated the number. He checked it, then pressed call. The first ring sounded. Annie clasped her hands together. Then the second. She almost stopped breathing. Before the third ring ended, a woman answered. Annie? The fear in that single word was unmistakable. Annie covered her mouth. Mom. Ethan switched the phone to speaker. I'm here. I'm okay. Annie, where are you? What happened? I've been calling you for almost an hour. I'm sorry. Annie's voice broke. I got robbed. They took my phone and my wallet, but I'm okay. A sharp breath came through the speaker. Are you hurt? No, Mom. Where are you? Annie gave her the intersection. Stay right there. I'm coming now. Mom, I'm really okay. Don't go anywhere with anyone. I won't. Annie looked at Ethan. A man stopped and let me use his phone. Monica was silent for a moment before saying, Let me speak to him. Ethan brought the phone closer. Yes, ma'am? Sir, I don't know who you are, but thank you. Thank you for helping my daughter. Ethan looked across at Annie standing beneath the streetlight, her eyes still red. You're welcome. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. All right. The call ended. Annie lowered her head and wiped both cheeks. Thank you. Ethan slipped the phone back into his coat. You already said that. Annie gave a faint laugh through the tears still clinging to her lashes. I'll probably have to say it a few more times. Ethan opened the car door, then looked around. The street was almost completely empty now. The wind had grown colder, and Annie's mother still needed some time to get there. He turned to David. Go inside and get her something hot to drink. Annie immediately shook her head. You don't have to do that, sir, I'm okay. Ethan looked at her hands, still trembling from the cold and everything she had just been through. You're not that okay. Annie pressed her lips together, a little embarrassed. Ethan asked, hot chocolate or coffee? She hesitated for a few seconds, then answered softly, hot chocolate. David headed toward the store. Annie remained by the curb with her arms wrapped around herself, while Ethan stood beside the sedan, no longer intending to leave before her mother arrived. David returned from the convenience store with a cup of hot chocolate. He handed it to Annie, and she immediately wrapped both hands around it as though that small bit of warmth were the only thing keeping her from trembling. She tried to take a sip, but her throat was still too tight, so she ended up holding the cup close to her chest instead. Ethan stood beside the sedan, occasionally checking his phone, though his eyes kept drifting toward the street. Annie couldn't take her eyes off the passing traffic. Every time a pair of headlights appeared at the end of the block, she straightened, her lips parting slightly, only for her shoulders to fall again when the car drove past without stopping. What does your mother drive? Ethan asked. A gray Honda. Annie tried to keep her voice steady. It's pretty old. The passenger side headlight is brighter than the other one. Ethan looked at her. You notice something that specific? Annie gave a small nod. Mom keeps saying she'll get it fixed after her next paycheck. But every time, something else needs the money more. She looked down at the cup. Her fingers were still trembling enough to make the plastic lid rattle softly. My pay for this week was in my wallet. How much? Not much. Annie pressed her lips together. I was going to give Mom some of it tomorrow for groceries. Ethan almost told her that money could be earned again, but when he saw her face, he kept the words to himself. Annie gave a sad little smile. I know a wallet can be replaced. A phone can be replaced. I can get new identification. She looked down at the torn shoulder of her jacket, but I still feel awful about it. It probably sounds stupid. It doesn't. Annie looked up. You were just trying to get home, Ethan said slowly. Two strangers showed up and, within minutes, took every choice out of your hands. Nobody goes through something like that and immediately acts like nothing happened. Annie's eyes reddened. She quickly looked away. My mom won't say it like that. What will she say? Annie quickly wiped the corner of one eye. She'll ask if I'm hurt, if I lost my keys, whether my bank card was in the wallet, and then she'll ask if I ate dinner. Ethan raised an eyebrow. After everything that happened, she'll still ask if you ate? A small smile finally appeared on Annie's face. That's my mom. At that moment, headlights appeared at the end of the street. Annie immediately looked up. A gray Honda approached faster than the cars before it. As it drew closer, Ethan noticed that one headlight was clearly brighter than the other. Annie nearly burst into tears. That's my mom. She hurriedly set the hot chocolate on the roof of the sedan and ran toward the Honda before it had fully stopped. The driver's door flew open. Annie. Monica rushed out of the car with a coat thrown over her clothes. Her hair hadn't even been brushed, and one of her shoes was not properly tied. She ran straight to her daughter and immediately cupped Annie's face in both hands. Let me look at you. Mom, I'm okay. Turn this way. Mom. Annie, let me look at you. Monica checked her cheeks, her neck, both arms, then spotted the torn shoulder of her jacket. Where did they hurt you? They didn't. They just grabbed my jacket. Did they hit you? No. Did you fall? No. Are you sure? Annie managed to nod. I'm sure. Monica looked at her for another second. Then she pulled her daughter into her arms. That was when Annie finally broke. Her chin began to tremble. Her arms wrapped tightly around her mother, and the tears she had forced herself to hold back ever since the robbery finally spilled over. Mom, I'm here. I'm sorry. Monica immediately pulled back just enough to look at her. What are you sorry for? I should have taken the ride my manager offered. If I hadn't walked. No. Monica held her daughter's face between her hands. Listen to me. Annie looked at her through tear-filled eyes. Those two men chose to do something wrong. You didn't. But, no buts. Monica wiped the tears from Annie's cheeks with her thumbs. You went to work. You finished your shift. You tried to come home. None of that made you deserve what happened. Annie lowered her eyes. Monica pulled her close again. We can replace the wallet. We can get another phone. We can earn the money back. Monica's voice caught. I just needed to see you standing here in front of me. Annie gripped the back of her mother's coat. I thought you'd be mad. I am mad. Annie looked up. Monica wiped another tear from her face. Just not at you. Annie started crying again and wrapped her arms around her mother. Ethan stood several steps away, quietly watching them. When Monica finally loosened her hold on Annie, she noticed him standing beside the sedan. Keeping one hand on her daughter's shoulder, she walked toward him. Are you the man who called me? Yes. Monica held out her hand. Thank you. Ethan shook it. It was only a phone call. No. Monica shook her head. Maybe to you it was only a phone call. To me, it was the moment I knew my daughter was still on her feet, still able to speak, and waiting for me to come get her. Ethan didn't answer right away. Monica continued. Annie told me you stayed with her. It was late. That's exactly why I know you didn't have to stay. Ethan started to answer, but when Monica lifted her face beneath the streetlight, he suddenly stopped. He looked at her longer than politeness normally allowed. Monica noticed. Is something wrong? Ethan frowned slightly. I'm sorry, He looked at her eyes, then at the slight pull at one corner of her mouth as she waited for his answer. A very old memory suddenly surfaced. Have we met before? Monica looked confused. I don't think so. What's your name? Monica Reed. Ethan went still. Annie looked at him. Mr. Whitmore? Monica turned toward her daughter. Whitmore? Yes. Annie wiped the remaining tears from her cheeks. Mom, this is Mr. Ethan Whitmore. Monica looked back at the man standing in front of her. Ethan Whitmore? Yes. Whitmore Holdings? Ethan gave a small nod. Monica laughed in surprise and looked at her daughter. Even in the middle of the night, you somehow know how to pick the right person to ask for a phone call. Mom, let me make one joke. You nearly scared 10 years off my life tonight. Annie lowered her head. I didn't know who he was. Monica turned back, but Ethan wasn't smiling. He was still studying her as though he were trying to pull another face out from beneath all the years that had passed. Monica. The way he said her name made her pause. Almost 30 years ago, did you work at a diner near West Madison? The smile disappeared from Monica's face. Yes. Lakeside Diner. This time Monica didn't answer immediately. Annie looked at her mother. Mom? Monica kept her eyes on Ethan. You know that place? Ethan took half a step closer. You usually worked mornings. Monica tightened her hand slightly around Annie's arm. And sometimes you stayed for the evening shift when someone called out. Her expression changed. How do you know that? Ethan swallowed. You had a customer who only ordered coffee. Monica didn't blink. He used to sit at the last table by the window because the staff didn't pay much attention to that corner. Monica's breathing slowed. Ethan continued. Some days he sat there for almost 2 hours with a single cup of coffee because he couldn't afford to order food. Monica's hand tightened on Annie's shoulder. Annie looked at her. Mom, what's wrong? Ethan looked directly at Monica. You once put a plate of eggs and toast in front of him even though he told you he hadn't ordered anything. Monica's lips parted slightly. Ethan gave a faint smile, but his eyes had already begun to redden. He told you he couldn't afford to pay for it. Monica whispered the next words before he could. And I told him pride could wait until after breakfast. Ethan fell silent. Monica stared at him as though she could no longer trust her own eyes. No way. Ethan gave a small nod. It was me. Monica lifted a hand to her mouth. Ethan? Yeah. You're that Ethan? A small emotional laugh escaped him. Still, May, if Annie's story touched your heart and Monica's kindness reminded you that one small act can be remembered for a lifetime, please like this video. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Monica looked from his expensive suit to the sedan behind him, then back to his face. You're the one who used to sit in the corner with a cup of coffee because you couldn't afford to eat? Annie turned toward Ethan so quickly that he almost smiled. You? Ethan looked at her. Apparently your mother knew me before I was anyone worth knowing. Monica shook her head as her eyes began to fill. Oh my God. She stared at him for a long moment. I've heard the name Ethan Whitmore hundreds of times on television, in newspapers, in advertisements, but I never once thought that it was the skinny kid who couldn't afford breakfast. Monica laughed through her tears. You were painfully thin. You kept making me eat, because you kept saying you weren't hungry, because I didn't have any money. I knew. Ethan stopped. You knew? Monica looked at him. Ethan, I was a waitress. I knew the difference between someone who wasn't hungry and someone staring at a menu pretending he wasn't hungry. The words left Ethan silent for a long moment. Annie looked between them, then asked softly, "Mom, did you help him?" Monica immediately shook her head. "I just gave him a few breakfasts." Ethan looked at Annie. "No." Monica turned toward him. "Ethan, you did more than give me a few breakfasts." His voice lowered. "You paid my bus fare when I didn't have a few dollars left. You slipped food into paper bags for me to take home and told me the kitchen had made too much because you knew that was the only way I would accept it." Monica lowered her eyes. "That was a long time ago. For you, maybe." Ethan looked at her. "Not for me." Annie stood between them, her eyes still swollen from everything she had been through that night. Monica looked at her daughter, then slowly shook her head as though she still couldn't believe it. "And out of millions of people in Chicago, tonight you walked up to him." Ethan looked at Annie. She stood there in her torn jacket, eyes still red, rubbing her hands together again against the cold. "Yes," he said. "She asked me." Annie bit her lip. "You did say no at first." Monica looked at Ethan. He raised an eyebrow. Annie quickly added, "But he came back." Ethan looked at her. "I'm glad I did." Monica exhaled and said, "Then I suppose I have to thank you again." Ethan shook his head. "No, Monica." He looked at her for a long moment. "If anyone should be saying thank you tonight, it's still me." Monica was about to object, but Ethan had already looked toward the old Honda. "Let David drive your car." "That's not necessary." "I know. Ethan, I just want to get both of you home." Monica was still about to refuse when Annie shifted slightly. It was only a small movement, but her legs seemed to weaken after everything she had endured that night. Monica immediately slipped an arm around her daughter to steady her. "Are you okay?" "I'm just tired." Monica looked at Annie's pale face, then at Ethan. Finally, she nodded. "All right, just tonight." Ethan opened the rear passenger door. Monica helped Annie toward the car. Before getting in, Annie stopped and turned toward Ethan. "Mr. Whitmore?" "Yes?" Annie clasped her hands together and looked at him with eyes that were still wet. "Thank you for changing your mind." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "I'm glad I changed my mind, too." A few minutes later, the sedan pulled away from the curb, carrying 3 people who, only a short while earlier, had all expected the night to end very differently. The sedan moved south through Chicago while David followed in Monica's Honda several car lengths behind. Annie sat beside her mother in the back seat, still holding what was left of the hot chocolate. The cup had gone lukewarm, but she seemed reluctant to put it down. It gave her hands something to do. Ethan sat across from them, watching the city pass through the tinted window. For several minutes, nobody spoke. The traffic had thinned, storefronts were closing, and the elevated train rattled somewhere above the next intersection. Monica finally broke the quiet. "So you really are that Ethan Whitmore?" Ethan glanced at her. "I'm afraid so." Annie looked between them. "You two are making this sound like Mom knew you before you had money." "She did," Ethan said. Monica gave him a look. "He makes it sound more dramatic than it was." Ethan's mouth moved slightly. "You used to bring me food when I couldn't afford dinner. I worked at a diner. Bringing people food was the job. Not when they couldn't pay." Monica sighed. "You were hungry." Annie turned toward her mother. "You never told me this. It was 28 years ago. That doesn't make it less interesting. It makes it old." Ethan shook his head. "Your mother has always had a talent for making important things sound ordinary." Monica folded her arms. "And you apparently grew up to make ordinary things sound expensive." That finally drew a small laugh from Annie. Ethan looked at her and noticed how tired she seemed now. The fear had faded enough for exhaustion to take its place. There was dirt on one knee of her jeans and a loose thread at the torn shoulder of her jacket. She had been trying to make herself smaller since the robbery, as though taking up less space might prevent anything else from happening. Monica noticed too. She reached over and rubbed Annie's hands between hers. "You're freezing." "I'm okay." "You always say that when you're not." "I learned from you." Monica gave her a tired smile. Ethan looked out the window again. "She said something earlier. That you told her if someone wanted her wallet, she should give it to them." Monica nodded. "I did. That was good advice." "It's practical advice." Annie looked at Ethan. "Mom has a whole list." "Oh?" "Don't argue with strangers. Don't get into cars with people you don't know." Monica turned to her. "Which makes tonight somewhat complicated." Annie glanced around the leather interior of the sedan. "I technically know him now." "You know his name?" "That's more than I knew 20 minutes ago." Ethan allowed himself another brief smile. Monica looked at him. You always this serious? Yes. No wonder you needed somebody feeding you. He gave her a dry look. That was not the reason. Annie smiled again, and for the first time since Ethan met her, she looked less frightened. Monica rested a hand on her knee. So tell me what happened after the diner. You disappeared one day. I got an interview in Milwaukee. Monica's expression changed at once. That interview. You remember. I remember you came in asking whether I knew the cheapest way to get there. Annie frowned. Why were you going to Milwaukee if you couldn't afford the trip? Because I needed work, Ethan said. And he was too proud to tell anybody he didn't have enough money to get there, Monica added. I told you. After I asked 3 times. Ethan glanced at Annie. Your mother was persistent. Still is. Monica ignored that. I gave him $40. Annie's eyebrows rose. 40? It was enough then. Ethan looked at Monica. It was also most of what you had. Monica looked toward the window. You remember that? I remember everything about that day. Her voice softened. You tried to give it back. Several times. You were annoying about it. I was embarrassed. You were hungry, broke, and 22. Embarrassment was not your biggest problem. Annie looked at Ethan with new interest. It was difficult for her to connect the man sitting across from her with someone who once counted the price of bus fare. What happened with the interview? I got the job. That was the beginning? Annie asked. The beginning of getting out of where I was. Monica looked at him. And now you own half the buildings we just drove past. Not half. Enough that your name is hard to miss. Ethan's expression grew more serious. I went back looking for you. Monica turned toward him. When? A few years later. The diner was closed. It went under. I asked around. Nobody knew where you'd gone. I moved twice. Changed jobs. Life got busy. I looked again after my first company started doing well. Monica gave him a puzzled look. Why? To pay you back. She shook her head immediately. I told you not to. You said pay it forward. Then I assume you did. Ethan didn't answer right away. Annie noticed. Monica noticed too. Before either could press him, the sedan slowed. We're close, Monica said, recognizing the street. Annie sat straighter. Outside, familiar brick apartment buildings appeared between corner businesses and late-night laundromats. A church sign announced a food drive for Saturday. Across the street, an older man in a Bears jacket was locking the metal gate over a small grocery. Porch lights remained on even though most windows were dark. This is us, Monica said. The sedan turned onto their block. Ethan looked out as they approached a long brick apartment building. Near the entrance stood a temporary construction sign illuminated by a portable work light. He read it once. Then again, Whitmore Urban Renewal Project. His expression changed. Stop the car. The driver pulled toward the curb. Monica looked at Ethan. Something wrong? He pointed toward the sign. This building is part of the Whitmore redevelopment? Monica followed his gesture. Yes. Ethan turned to her. Since when? Your company bought it months ago. That project includes relocation assistance. Monica gave a humorless laugh. That's what the letters say. Ethan looked back at the building. You received an offer? An offer isn't much help if it won't cover another apartment in the neighborhood. What about the tenant support program? What tenant support program? That answer caught him. Monica opened the door, but Ethan spoke before she stepped out. How long do you have? 3 months. Annie sat quietly now. This was a conversation she had heard too many times at the kitchen table. Monica continued. Mrs. Jenkins upstairs has been here 31 years. Mr. Carter on the second floor is 72 and uses a walker. The Wilsons have 2 jobs between them and still can't find another place close enough to work. People keep filing complaints. Half of them never get an answer. Ethan's jaw tightened. That isn't how the project was presented to me. Monica looked directly at him. Maybe that's the problem. He turned toward her. You think I knew? I don't know what you knew, Ethan. There was no accusation in her tone, which somehow made it harder to dismiss. I know what's happening here. Ethan reached for his phone. I can arrange another apartment for you. Somewhere better. I can cover the rent. Annie's tuition too. If that's an issue. Monica's expression hardened at once. No. Monica, I didn't give you $40 so you could spend the rest of your life trying to buy your way out of feeling guilty. This isn't guilt. Then don't treat it like a debt. Annie looked down, giving her mother the privacy of the moment without pretending she could not hear. Ethan lowered the phone. Monica opened the door, then paused. Legal and fair aren't always the same thing, Ethan. He said nothing. She nodded toward the sign carrying his name. If you want to help me, don't buy me another apartment. Find out why people here are being pushed out of the ones they already have. Monica stepped onto the sidewalk and Annie followed. Before closing the door, Annie turned back. Good night, Mr. Whitmore. Good night, Annie. She hesitated. And thank you. Again. Ethan watched the two women walk toward the entrance together. David parked Monica's Honda behind the sedan and returned the keys. Ethan barely noticed. His attention stayed on the large white letters outside the building. Whitmore. For most of his adult life, he had worked to make that name mean security, success, and something permanent. Tonight, for the first time, he wondered what it meant to people who had never been invited into his office. He took out his phone. David opened the driver's door. Home, sir? Not yet. Ethan searched his contacts until he found the name he wanted. Martin Hale. Then he pressed call. Martin Hale answered on the fourth ring. Ethan, I need you in my office at 7 tomorrow morning. There was a brief pause. Is something wrong? I'll tell you when you get here. Ethan ended the call before Martin could ask another question. By 6:45 the next morning, he was already at Whitmore Holdings headquarters, 23 floors above downtown Chicago. He had slept less than 3 hours. Monica's building kept returning to his thoughts, especially the sign outside carrying his family name, as if that alone guaranteed whatever happened behind it had been done properly. At exactly 7, Martin walked in carrying coffee and a tablet. He wore the same dark suit he favored for board meetings and looked more curious than concerned. You sounded like the building was on fire. Ethan pushed a printed document across his desk. South Side. Redevelopment. Property number 417. Martin glanced at the page. What about it? How many tenants are being displaced? Martin pulled out the chair across from him. I'd have to check the exact number. You approved the project. I approve hundreds of things. Then check. Martin studied Ethan for a moment before opening the file on his tablet. 46 occupied units when we acquired it. 39 now. And relocation? Offered according to policy. What does that mean? It means notices, financial assistance where applicable, referrals to available housing, the usual package. Ethan leaned forward. I spoke to a woman last night who lives there. She has 3 months to leave and says the amount offered won't cover a comparable apartment in the neighborhood. Martin gave a tired sigh. There are always complaints when redevelopment starts. That wasn't my question. No, but it's the answer. People don't like being told their building is changing. They assume the company is attacking them personally. Heat problems? Martin glanced down at the tablet. Maintenant issue. Unanswered repair requests? Could be the management contractor. Residents saying letters disappear? Martin's eyes lifted. Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? It matters if you're getting one side of a dispute and treating it like an audit. Ethan's expression tightened. Do I need an audit? Martin sat back. No, you need context. Give me some. Martin closed the tablet. The building is old. Repairs exceed its long-term value. The neighborhood is changing. Land prices are rising. And delaying the project costs us money every month. We offered more than the minimum required. Some tenants accepted, some haven't. That's normal. And the ones who can't afford to relocate? We are not a social services agency, Ethan. The words came easily, but something about them bothered Ethan. Martin noticed. I'm not being heartless. I'm being realistic. We have obligations to shareholders, lenders, pension funds. If every project stopped because a tenant was unhappy, we wouldn't have a company. Ethan looked toward the Chicago skyline beyond the windows. Last night Monica had said nearly the opposite. Legal and fair weren't always the same thing. For years, Martin had been the man Ethan trusted to translate complicated operations into decisions. They had survived recessions, acquisitions, labor disputes, and lawsuits together. After Rachel and Emily died, Martin had taken on even more. Ethan had been grateful for it. That history carried weight, maybe too much. Have community relations review the complaints, Ethan said. Martin nodded. I'll have someone on it today. And send me the relocation package. Of course. Martin stood, then stopped near the door. Ethan, this wouldn't have anything to do with the woman you mentioned, would it? Ethan looked up. Why? You don't usually call me before midnight about one apartment building. She's someone I knew a long time ago. Martin's expression softened just enough to appear sympathetic. I see. No, you don't. Martin lifted a hand. Fair enough. I'm only saying personal history can make these things feel different. Maybe they should feel different more often. Martin gave him a measured look, then left. For the next 2 hours, Ethan tried to return to normal work. He reviewed a shipping acquisition, rejected a financing proposal, and sat through half a conference call with New York. He absorbed almost none of it. At 10:30, his assistant appeared at the door. Samuel Ortiz is here. Ethan frowned. I didn't schedule Samuel. He says you'll want to see him. That sounded exactly like Samuel. Send him in. Samuel entered carrying an old leather briefcase that looked as though it had survived 3 decades of courtrooms. At 68, he had stopped caring whether a boardroom found him fashionable. He wore a navy blazer, a pale shirt without a tie, and reading glasses hanging from a cord. You look terrible, Samuel said. Good morning to you too. I'm retired. I'm allowed to be unpleasant before lunch. Samuel placed the briefcase on Ethan's desk and opened it. What is this? Something I should have brought you sooner. He pulled out a thick paper folder. Ethan looked at it. You know we have digital records. Samuel lowered himself into the chair. Computers forget when somebody tells them to. Paper has a longer memory. Ethan opened the folder. The first page was a tenant complaint. Then another. Maintenance failures, relocation disputes, security complaints, requests for hearings. Several letters alleged Black and Latino tenants were treated differently from residents at more profitable properties. Ethan stopped on one document. This is 2 years old. Yes. Why am I seeing it now? Because when I was still consulting for the company, a property manager sent me a copy after she said nobody answered her internally. Who was it sent to? Samuel pointed. Martin Hale's office. Ethan turned another page. Another complaint. Sam Root. Then another. Some ended with Frank Dwyer and corporate security. Ethan's face hardened. How many? In that folder? 37. And outside that folder? I don't know. Ethan pushed back from the desk. That doesn't prove Martin did anything. Samuel nodded. Correct. He's been with me 25 years. Also correct. You think he built some system to target tenants and I somehow never saw it? I think you asked me here to tell you the truth, not to protect your opinion of your friend. I didn't ask you here at all. Samuel almost smiled. That has never stopped me. Ethan closed the folder. 25 years, Sam. Samuel's expression became more serious. 25 years is a history, Ethan. It isn't an alibi. Ethan looked away. Samuel continued more softly. Loyalty matters. You know I believe that. But loyalty is honorable only when it's loyalty to what is right. Martin stood beside me through everything. I know. After Rachel and Emily, he ran half this company while I could barely sit through a board meeting. I know that too. Then don't ask me to treat him like a criminal because some complaints passed through his office. I'm not asking you to. Samuel tapped the folder. I'm asking you to stop treating friendship as evidence. That landed harder than Ethan expected. He stood and walked toward the windows. Below him, traffic moved through downtown. Thousands of people crossing streets, entering offices, catching buses, going to work. From this height, they became dots moving between buildings. Samuel spoke from behind him. You didn't personally ignore every repair request. You didn't write every relocation notice. But your name is on the company. Ethan turned. Samuel held his eyes. Grief explains why you stepped away from parts of the business. It doesn't erase what happened while you weren't looking. For several seconds, Ethan said nothing. Then he walked back to the desk and opened the folder again. Who else has copies? A few tenant groups, some former employees. I want names. Samuel nodded. And I want nobody at corporate calling them first. That's smart. I'm not finished. Samuel waited. No press. No community relations team. No Martin. What are you going to do? Ethan picked up the first complaint again. Something I should have done before I called anybody. The following morning, a black sedan stopped several blocks from Monica's building. Ethan stepped out without an executive entourage, without cameras and without anyone from public relations. Samuel joined him on the sidewalk carrying the same battered briefcase. Ahead of them, the neighborhood was already awake. A church basement door stood open. An older man swept the sidewalk outside a grocery store. Two women carried foil trays toward a community meeting. Ethan looked at the block for a moment, then started walking. For the first time since Monica had pointed at his name on that sign, he was no longer asking what his report said. He was going to ask the people who had been living underneath them. The church basement smelled of fresh coffee, paper, and the cinnamon rolls someone had brought in before the meeting. Folding chairs had been arranged in uneven rows, and along one wall stood a table covered with folders, handwritten notes, photographs, copies of lease agreements, and envelopes from Whitmore Holdings. Ethan paused near the entrance while Samuel signed his name on a visitor sheet. Nobody rushed toward Ethan. Nobody seemed impressed that one of the wealthiest men in Chicago had walked into the basement without cameras or public relations staff. Most of the people inside had been dealing with his company for months, and whatever reputation he had in business magazines meant little compared with an eviction notice taped to a front door. Monica saw him first. She was carrying a cardboard tray of coffee when she stopped beside a table. "You actually came." "I said I would. You said you were going to look into it." "I decided looking into it from my office wasn't enough." Monica handed one cup to Samuel, who accepted it with a grateful nod. Ethan reached for another. "You drink it black, right?" she asked. He paused. "You remember that? You were too broke to order breakfast, but somehow you were very particular about coffee." Samuel looked between them. "I'm already learning things about Ethan that 20 years of legal work never gave me. None of them are relevant," Ethan said. Monica almost smiled. "That depends who you ask." An older man approached using a cane. He wore a faded army cap and carried an envelope under one arm. "Miss Reed, is this him?" Monica nodded. "Mr. Carter, this is Ethan Whitmore." The man looked Ethan over. "I know who he is." Ethan extended his hand. "Good morning." Mr. Carter shook it firmly. 70. 2 years old. And I've lived in the same building, 31 of them. Paid rent on time every month except once when I was in the hospital. I paid that one 8 days late. Ethan nodded. "Monica told me some of what's happening. Then let me tell you the rest." He opened the envelope and removed several pages. The first was a notice informing him that his lease would not be renewed after redevelopment began. Another listed relocation resources. A third was a maintenance request. My bathroom ceiling started leaking in March. I reported it 5 times. Was it repaired? In September. Ethan looked at the dates. 6 months? After part of the plaster came down. Samuel took a photograph from the envelope and examined it. Mr. Carter continued. Then I got a letter saying the building needed major work because maintenance costs had gotten too high. Funny thing is, maintenance gets expensive when nobody does it. A woman standing nearby spoke before Ethan could answer. Same thing happened in my unit. Then another voice joined from the table. And mine. Within a minute, Ethan was surrounded by residents holding copies of requests, notices, inspection forms, and unanswered letters. He asked questions instead of defending the company. "What month did you send this? Who did you speak to? Did you receive a written response? Was the relocation amount explained to you?" Most answers led to the same conclusion. Residents had tried to use the system. The system either delayed them, redirected them, or stopped responding. An older woman named Mrs. Jenkins sat near the coffee table with a thick folder across her lap. "They offered me enough money to move, technically." Ethan pulled a chair closer. "Why technically?" "Because the number looks reasonable until you call apartments." She handed him a page where she had written rents from nearby buildings. "My rent now is $875. The places they referred me to are $1,200, $1,300, sometimes more. I'm retired. My check does not grow because your company sends me a nice letter." Ethan compared the figures. "Did anyone from Whitmore meet with you?" "A young man called once. He read from a script." "What did he say?" "That I had options." Mrs. Jenkins gave a tired smile. "I asked him which option let me stay near my doctor, my church, and the neighbors who check on me when my arthritis gets bad. He didn't have that part on his script." Ethan folded the page carefully and returned it. Across the basement, Annie had been sorting documents into a large 3-ring binder. She wore her grocery store jacket over a sweatshirt and had a pen tucked behind one ear. When Ethan walked over, she turned the binder toward him. "I made copies." "Of what?" "Everything people gave Mom after the meeting last month." She opened the first section. Maintenance requests here. Relocation notices here. Emails and letters here. Photos in the back. Ethan flipped through the pages. Dates had been marked in colored tabs. You organized this? Mostly. Some people only had paper copies. So I scanned them at the library. Why? Annie looked at him as though the answer should have been obvious. Because nobody was keeping track. Ethan stopped on a page containing 3 nearly identical complaints submitted by different tenants. They all went to the same management office. Keep going. He turned several pages. Another complaint, then another. Same office. Some had been forwarded to corporate security. Samuel stepped closer and compared them to papers from his briefcase. This matches what I brought you yesterday. Annie looked at Ethan. There are more. How many? I stopped counting after 60. Ethan's eyes moved across the room. People were drinking coffee, comparing notices, helping one another understand forms. An older man was explaining a lease clause to his neighbor. Someone had written the number for a legal aid office on a whiteboard near the door. This was not a collection of people waiting for somebody wealthy to rescue them. They had already been helping one another long before Ethan arrived. Monica joined him. This is every Thursday night now. You organize it? Everyone organizes it. Ethan looked around. Why didn't anyone contact my office directly? An older man at the next table heard him. We did. Ethan turned. The man held up a certified mail receipt, 3 times. Ethan accepted it and read the address. Whitmore Holdings, Executive Correspondence. Did you get an answer? A form letter. What did it say? That my concern had been forwarded to the appropriate department. And then? Nothing. The man took the receipt back. People like us don't get your phone number, Mr. Whitmore. Ethan had no answer. Annie closed the binder. That's the problem. He looked at her. She spoke without raising her voice. If someone has enough money, they can hire a lawyer. If they know the right people, somebody returns their call. Everyone else fills out forms and hopes the forms don't disappear. Ethan said, that shouldn't determine whether someone gets heard. No, Annie replied, because justice isn't justice if only the people who can afford to be heard get heard. The words stayed with him as he moved through the basement for another hour. He spoke with a retired postal worker, a woman who had worked at the same hospital for 26 years, and a man who owned the small barber shop across the street. Their stories were different, but the pattern underneath them was becoming difficult to dismiss. By early afternoon, most of the chairs had been folded and stacked against the wall. Monica found Ethan outside near the church steps. Samuel was a short distance away, making notes in the margin of a document. So? Monica asked. Ethan looked toward the apartment building across the street, where the Whitmore sign was visible above the sidewalk. I'm going to find out who did this. Monica held his gaze. Don't stop there. What do you mean? Find out who you trusted to do it. Find out who signed off. Find out who ignored people when they complained. She paused. And find out why nobody thought you needed to know. Ethan nodded once. This time there was no offer to buy Monica another apartment. No promise of an easy solution. I will. Monica studied him for a moment before accepting the answer. As Ethan and Samuel walked back toward the sedan, Annie hurried after them with the binder. Mr. Whitmore. He turned. She held it out. You should take this. Ethan accepted it. I'll return it. I have copies. He looked at the thick binder in his hands. Of course she did. On the ride downtown, Samuel opened his notebook. What now? Ethan looked down at the first tab Annie had labeled in blue ink. Independent audit. Every property connected to these complaints. Every relocation payment. Every contractor. Every email. And Martin? Ethan's expression changed. Not yet. Samuel closed his notebook. For 25 years, Martin Hale had known nearly every important decision Ethan made before the rest of the company did. This time, Ethan intended to learn the truth before his oldest friend knew he was looking for it. By Monday morning, Ethan had turned Annie's blue-tabbed binder into the center of an investigation that almost nobody inside Whitmore Holdings knew existed. He brought in an outside accounting firm from New York and a housing compliance attorney Samuel trusted. They were told to review every property connected to the complaints, trace relocation payments, compare maintenance budgets against actual work orders, and preserve every internal email before anyone had time to delete or alter it. Ethan signed the authorization himself, then instructed his legal department to route the work through Samuel rather than the normal executive chain. Martin Hale was not included. That decision bothered Ethan more than he admitted. For 25 years, Martin had been one of the first people he called when something threatened the company. Now Ethan was deliberately keeping him outside the door. Samuel noticed. "You can still stop this if you think you're wrong about him." Ethan closed the audit authorization folder. "I don't think I'm right about him yet." "Good. What does that mean?" "It means you're finally investigating facts instead of deciding what you want the facts to say." Ethan gave him an irritated look. Samuel picked up his coffee. "Retirement has made me very difficult to fire." 2 days later, Annie came to Whitmore Holdings after her shift to help identify several documents residents had given her without names attached. She arrived in the same grocery store jacket Ethan had seen the first night, carrying a canvas tote bag with a notebook, a bottle of water, and 2 granola bars inside. Ethan found her in a conference room with 3 members of the audit team. "That one came from Mrs. Jenkins," Annie said, pointing to a maintenance request. "The handwriting is hers. And this photograph came from Mr. Carter's unit. The date should be March, not May." The auditor made a note. Annie looked up and noticed Ethan. Hey. She went right back to the files. Ethan stood there for a moment, surprised by how quickly she had become comfortable enough not to treat his entrance like an event. When the meeting ended, Annie gathered her papers. "Your mother picking you up?" "No, I'm taking the bus. It's getting late." "It's 6:30. You work evenings and take buses home after what happened?" Annie stopped putting papers into her tote. "I still have to get places. I can have David drive you." "That's okay. It wasn't really a question." She looked at him. "Then you should probably make it one." Ethan paused. Annie's expression softened a little. "You helped me that night. I'm grateful. But I can't start living like I need a driver because something bad happened once." Ethan considered arguing, then remembered Monica's voice outside the apartment building. "Don't treat it like a debt." "All right," he said. "Would you accept a ride?" Annie smiled. "Yes." They left together 20 minutes later. Chicago traffic moved slowly through the loop. Annie sat in the rear seat beside Ethan, with a community college brochure open across her knees. She had highlighted sections about prerequisite courses and nursing programs. Ethan noticed. "You decided where you're applying?" "I applied already." "Nursing? That's the plan. Why nursing?" Annie shrugged. "I'm good with people when they're scared." Ethan looked at her. She realized what she had said and smiled. "Apparently not myself. Just other people." "How much is tuition?" Annie looked up from the brochure. "Why?" "I asked a question, and I know where this is going." Ethan frowned. "Where?" "You're about to offer to pay for it." "I was considering it." "No, you didn't even hear the offer." "I heard the beginning." Ethan folded his hands. "Annie, the amount would make no difference to me. That's not the point." "Then what is?" She closed the brochure. "My mom has spent my whole life teaching me not to confuse somebody being generous with somebody getting a say over me. I'm not asking for a say over you." "I know." "Then why refuse?" "Because I barely know you." That caught him off guard. Annie continued. "You've been kind to us. You're helping with the building. But if somebody pays for something that big, it changes the relationship whether they mean it to or not." Ethan studied her face. She added, "There's a difference between helping somebody and making them feel like they owe you. My intention wasn't to make you feel indebted." "I believe you." "Then let me help." She shook her head. "I filled out FAFSA. I applied for grants. I'm working. If I get accepted, I'll figure out the rest." "And if the rest isn't enough?" Annie thought about it. "Then maybe I'll ask for advice." "Advice?" "Yes. That's all I'm allowed to offer? For now." Ethan looked toward the window and gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. "You're very much your mother's daughter. I've been told." The next afternoon, Annie returned with Monica to provide several signed statements. The meeting ran longer than expected. While Monica remained with Samuel and the compliance attorney, Annie waited in Ethan's office, working on an essay for her college application. Ethan came in carrying 2 folders. "You could use the conference room. It's full. The library upstairs is quieter." "I'm fine here." He nodded and went to his desk. For nearly half an hour, they worked without speaking. Annie typed on her laptop while Ethan reviewed property records. At one point, she stood to stretch and walked toward a bookshelf lined with framed photographs from company anniversaries, charity dinners, and award ceremonies. One photograph was different. No suits, no podium, no company logo. A woman stood beside Ethan in a winter coat, smiling toward the camera. Next to them was a young woman with Ethan's eyes and the same impatient half-smile he sometimes wore when someone took too long to make a point. Annie stopped. Ethan noticed immediately. "That's Rachel," he said. Annie turned slightly. "And Emily?" He nodded. She looked at the photograph again. "She looks happy." She was. Annie did not ask what happened. She did not ask when. She only said, "I'm sorry." Then she returned to her laptop. Ethan looked at the photograph for several seconds longer than he meant to. Most people, when they learned about Rachel and Emily, changed around him. Their voices softened too much. They searched for the right thing to say. Some offered sympathy that felt rehearsed. Annie had simply acknowledged the loss and given him the dignity of deciding whether to speak about it. A few minutes later, she frowned at her computer. "What? My charger's dying." "Your charger is dying?" "The laptop is dying. The charger is apparently at home, living a much better life without me." Ethan opened a drawer. "There's a spare adapter in the cabinet by the window." Annie found it and plugged in. "You just have everything in this office, don't you?" "No." She looked toward the photograph again, but said nothing. Ethan understood what she had not said. No, he did not have everything. When Monica finally finished her meeting, Annie packed her bag. Before leaving, she stopped beside Ethan's desk. "For what it's worth, I wasn't saying I'd never accept help. I know. I just want to know I earned my way into whatever comes next." Ethan nodded. "That I understand." Annie smiled and followed Monica out. After they left, Ethan opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was an old envelope containing a worn diner receipt, a faded note with an address that no longer existed, and a newer $20 bill he had once kept simply because it reminded him of the days when $20 could decide whether he ate. He looked at it for a moment, then closed the drawer. 28 years ago, Monica had helped him without asking to own any part of his future. For the first time, Ethan understood why Annie needed him to do the same. 2 evenings later, the outside audit ran past business hours, and Samuel suggested moving the last review session away from Whitmore Holdings. Too many people had begun asking why unfamiliar accountants were requesting archived property records, and Ethan did not want Martin learning the full scope of the investigation before they had something solid. So Monica and Annie drove north to Lake Forest for the first time. Annie expected something grand, and the house was certainly larger than anything she had ever entered. But what struck her first was how little of Ethan seemed to be in it. The entryway was spotless. The furniture looked carefully chosen. Nothing sat where it had not been placed deliberately. There were no shoes by the stairs, no unopened mail on a counter, no jacket forgotten over the back of a chair. Monica noticed it too. "You actually live here?" Ethan took her coat. "That's generally what houses are for." "I'm serious." "So Annie." She glanced toward the wide staircase. "It looks like somebody prepares it for a photograph every morning." "That would be Mrs. Alvarez. She manages the house." Annie smiled. "Does she let you touch anything?" Ethan gave her a look. "I pay the mortgage." "That wasn't my question." Monica tried not to laugh and failed. The legal team had already spread documents across the long dining table. For the next 2 hours, Monica compared tenant names against relocation files, while Annie helped organize scanned records. Ethan moved between the dining room and his study, answering questions from Samuel and the auditors. By 9, Annie had finished everything they needed from her. She looked at Monica. "How much longer?" "Maybe an hour. I'm going to find a bathroom." "Second door past the stairs," Ethan said without looking up from a file. Annie headed into the hallway. She found the bathroom, washed her hands, and stepped back out. On the return trip, she noticed a framed photograph on a small table near the end of the corridor. She slowed. Emily. Annie recognized her from Ethan's office. In this picture, Emily wore a high school sweatshirt and held a mug with both hands, smiling at whoever had taken the photograph. Behind the table was a closed door. Annie understood without asking. She was turning away when Ethan came around the corner. He saw where she was standing. His entire expression changed. "Don't go in there." The sharpness in his voice made Annie stop. "I wasn't." Ethan looked from her to the door. "You shouldn't be in this part of the hallway. You told me the bathroom was down here." "I meant the one near the stairs." "You said second door past the stairs." Ethan realized she was right, but the tension remained in his face. Annie took a step away from the photograph. I didn't touch anything. Ethan's voice was lower now. I know. She studied him for a second, then nodded. Okay. She walked back toward the dining room without asking what was behind the door or why it mattered. Ethan remained there after she left. The key was still in his pocket. It had been there for 4 years. He had not intended to speak to Annie that way. The reaction had come before thought, the same instinct that made him avoid that end of the hallway unless absolutely necessary. When he returned to the dining room, Annie was sitting beside Monica, scrolling through a college application on her laptop as though nothing had happened. Ethan waited until Monica went to speak with Samuel. Annie. She looked up. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. It's okay. No, it wasn't. Annie closed the laptop halfway. Ethan glanced toward the hallway. That was Emily's room. I figured. I haven't opened it in a long time. She nodded. You don't have to explain it to me. Ethan hesitated. You're not curious? Of course I'm curious. That answer surprised him. But being curious doesn't mean I get to ask. Ethan looked at her for a moment. Thank you. Annie reopened the laptop. For what? For understanding a boundary without making me defend it. She shrugged lightly. Everybody has doors they don't want people opening. That stayed with him. The meeting finally ended shortly after 10. Samuel left with 2 auditors. But Monica remained in the kitchen while Annie finished an application essay at the dining table. Ethan poured coffee. Monica looked at the clock. You drink coffee at 10 at night? I sleep poorly regardless. That's not the same as it being a good idea. He handed her a mug. You still take cream? Monica looked at him. You remember? Apparently I remember inconvenient details. She added cream herself and leaned against the counter. For what it's worth, Annie isn't upset with you. I apologized. She told me. Already? I'm her mother. Of course already. Ethan took a sip. Monica watched him for a moment. She said it was Emily's room. His hand stopped briefly around the mug. Yes. You don't have to talk about it. That seems to be the popular rule tonight. Monica waited. Ethan looked toward the dark window over the sink. Rachel and Emily died 4 years ago. Monica did not interrupt. A drunk driver crossed the median. Rachel was driving. Emily was with her. Monica lowered her mug. I'm sorry. Ethan nodded once. That room has been closed since the funeral. You kept everything? Most of it. Because you wanted it there? Because moving anything felt worse. Monica understood the difference. You know what people tell you after something like that? What? That eventually it gets easier. Did it? No. He gave a tired half smile. You just become more efficient at carrying it. Monica looked down into her coffee. When Annie didn't come home that night, I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation. Missed bus. Dead battery. Extra work. She paused. But once you've spent enough years caring about someone, your mind knows exactly where to hurt you. Ethan looked at her. That's why I stopped letting people get close. Monica's expression changed slightly. Does it work? For what? Not hurting. He did not answer. She continued. Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like you stopped hurting. It looks like you stopped giving the hurt competition. Ethan looked away. Loving someone gives the world a place to hurt you. Monica considered that. Then she said, loving someone gives you a reason to care what happens to the world. He met her eyes. Neither tried to improve the sentence. From the dining room, Annie called. Mr. Whitmore? Ethan turned. My laptop's about to die again. Monica smiled into her coffee. You really do attract electronic emergencies. The following afternoon, Annie returned with Monica for another review session. Ethan had made one small change before they arrived. The library beside his study had a desk near the window that had gone unused for years. He cleared it himself and placed a lamp, legal pad, pencils, and a universal laptop charger beside the chair. When Annie walked in, she stopped. What's this? You complained about nowhere quiet to work. I did not complain. You strongly implied dissatisfaction. She touched the charger and looked at him. Is this another attempt to buy me? Ethan almost smiled. It's a desk, Annie. She sat down and opened her laptop. Just checking. Ethan returned to his study. But before he left, he glanced once toward the closed door at the far end of the hall. For the first time in 4 years, the key in his pocket no longer felt quite as permanent. By Thursday morning, the outside audit had moved beyond tenant complaints and into the company's financial records. Ethan arrived at Whitmore Holdings before 7 and found Samuel already waiting in the smaller conference room beside his office. Two auditors sat across from him with laptops open, several printed spreadsheets spread between them. Samuel pointed toward the empty chair. "You're going to want to sit down." Ethan took the chair but did not remove his coat. "What did you find?" One of the auditors, a woman named Karen Ellis, turned her laptop toward him. "At first we thought the problem was poor property management. Then we started matching maintenance spending against vendor payments. And? The money was being spent." Ethan frowned. "Then why weren't the repairs being done?" Karen opened another file. "Because some of the vendors receiving the money don't appear to have done the work." She showed him a list of companies. 3 names appeared repeatedly: Northline Property Services, Lake Meridian Maintenance, Brighton Community Solutions. Ethan recognized none of them. Karen continued. "They have different mailing addresses, different officers, different bank accounts. On paper, they look separate." "On paper? The corporate registrations lead back to 2 holding companies. Those lead to another entity in Delaware." Samuel slid a document toward Ethan. "And that entity has financial connections to a former business partner of Frank Dwyer." Ethan read the page twice. "How much?" "So far, just over $6 million in contracts across 9 properties. $6 million for work residents say wasn't done." "Some work was done," Karen said. "Enough to make the invoices less obvious. But nowhere near what was billed." Ethan removed his coat and placed it over the back of the chair. "What about relocation money?" The second auditor answered. "That's worse." He pushed another set of records across the table. Several properties had relocation budgets approved at one level, while tenants received amounts well below those figures. Ethan traced one line with his finger. "This project approved $400,000. "Yes. Actual tenant payments? $187,000. "Where did the rest go?" "We're tracing it." Samuel leaned forward. "It didn't disappear by accident." Ethan said nothing. Karen opened a folder containing printed emails. "We also found internal correspondence." Ethan looked at the first page. The email chain involved senior property managers, Dwyer and Martin Hale. One message discussed a building where residents had organized legal assistance. Martin had written, "Prioritize properties where tenant resistance is least likely to delay acquisition." Another email from Dwyer was less careful. "These people won't lawyer up. Keep pressure on and the remaining units will clear." Ethan's eyes stopped there. Samuel watched him. "Keep reading." The next message concerned a mostly black neighborhood where Whitmore wanted several connected parcels for a commercial development. A manager had warned that elderly residents were refusing relocation. Martin's response was brief. "They have no political leverage and limited resources. Do not let sentiment slow the schedule." Ethan placed the page down. Karen said, "There's more." "How much more?" "Enough that this isn't one bad project." She opened a map. Colored markers covered several parts of Chicago. "These are the properties where maintenance delays, aggressive relocation practices, and unusual vendor billing overlap." The pattern was clear. The harshest tactics appeared in neighborhoods with lower household incomes and large Black or Latino populations. Ethan looked at the map for a long time. "What about our higher income properties? Different contractors, faster repairs, fewer security referrals, much higher settlement amounts when disputes happen." Samuel said, "Same company, different rules depending on who lives there." Ethan stood and walked toward the window. For years, he had believed the distance between his office and the street below was simply the cost of running a large organization. He hired people to know the details because no one person could know all of them. Now that distance looked different. His name had been printed on every relocation notice. His logo had been on every unanswered letter. Whether he had read them or not, people had experienced Whitmore Holdings as one company. His company. Freeze every redevelopment project connected to these files. Karen looked up. "All of them? All of them?" Samuel asked. "Do you want Martin informed?" "Not yet. You can't hide a freeze of that size for long. I'm not trying to hide it forever." Ethan turned back toward the table. "Send legal preservation notices to every department involved. No deleted emails, no destroyed paper files, no altered vendor records. I want the auditors to have access before anyone has time to clean anything." Karen nodded. "And the residents?" Samuel asked. Ethan thought of Mrs. Jenkins and Mr. Carter. "Pause every relocation deadline connected to these properties. That may cost the company a significant amount." "I'm aware." Samuel gave a small nod. "Good. Ethan looked at him. Don't congratulate me for stopping something that shouldn't have been happening. I wasn't. Then what was that? Relief. Ethan looked back at the map. Samuel continued. Not knowing isn't the same as approving what they did. Ethan's jaw tightened. But once you know, Samuel said, what happens next is yours. By noon, the first internal notices went out. Martin Hale appeared in Ethan's office 23 minutes later. You froze 6 projects. 9. Martin shut the door behind him. What is going on? We're reviewing vendor contracts and relocation practices. Based on what? Records. What records? Ethan looked up from his desk. Why does that matter? Because you don't stop 9 projects without talking to me unless someone has convinced you there's a crisis. No one convinced me of anything. Martin stepped closer. You're reacting emotionally. Ethan's expression cooled. Be careful. Martin stopped. For a second, the friendship between them disappeared, and only chairman and COO remained. Then Martin adjusted his tone. I'm saying this company has procedures. You've always respected them. I'm checking whether the procedures have been respected. Martin studied him. Is this because of Monica Reed? Ethan said nothing. That was answer enough. Martin nodded slowly. I see. No, Martin, I don't think you do. Martin left several minutes later without raising his voice. That evening, he saw something else. Ethan ended a meeting at 6:45 instead of letting it run past 8. We'll finish tomorrow, he said. Martin glanced at the agenda. There are still 3 items. Tomorrow. Since when do we stop halfway through? Ethan gathered his papers. Since I have somewhere to be. He did. Annie had asked him to sit in on a short information session at the community college because Monica was working late and she wanted someone to help her understand the financial aid forms afterward. Ethan had said yes before realizing how strange the answer felt. Martin watched him leave. For 4 years, Ethan Whitmore had worked as though nothing outside the company could pull him away from it. Now there were 2 people who could. Later that night, Martin stood beside the windows in his office, while Frank Dwyer waited near the desk. He's changing, Dwyer said. Martin looked down at the city. No. Dwyer waited. Martin's voice lowered. He's becoming reachable. Because of the mother? And the girl. Dwyer said nothing. Martin finally turned. Before them, Ethan had nothing left to lose. He picked up the audit notice from his desk. Now he does. 2 days after the audit expanded, Annie received an email while she was restocking cereal at the grocery store. She almost ignored the vibration in her apron because her shift manager was walking toward the aisle. But something made her check. The subject line showed the name of the community college she had applied to. For several seconds, Annie only read the first sentence. Then she read it again. Her hand flew to her mouth. You okay? Her manager asked. Annie turned the screen toward him. I got in. He leaned closer, then broke into a grin. Well, look at you. I actually got in. Call your mother. I'm working. I'm your manager. I'm officially ordering you to take 5 minutes and call your mother. Monica answered on the second ring. Everything all right? Mom. What? I got accepted. There was a short pause, followed by a sound that made Annie laugh. Are you crying? No. You are. I have allergies. In November? Don't ruin this for me. That evening, Monica insisted on making dinner even though she had worked all day. By 7, their apartment smelled of baked chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, and warm dinner rolls. Annie had bought a pie from the grocery store with her employee discount and placed it in the center of the table as if it were a trophy. Ethan arrived carrying flowers for Monica and a fountain pen in a small box for Annie. Annie opened it carefully. This better not be secretly worth $5,000. It isn't. How much? You're not supposed to ask what a gift costs. My mother says never accept anything you don't understand. Monica called from the kitchen. Do not use me against the man while he's standing here. Ethan took off his coat. It's a pen, Annie. She examined it. Just a pen? A good one. I can live with that. Dinner felt unfamiliar to Ethan in a way he could not easily explain. Nobody discussed market forecasts or acquisitions. Monica complained that Annie left cabinet doors open. Annie accused her mother of putting hot sauce on everything. Ethan was asked whether he preferred white meat or dark meat, and discovered that Monica considered either an unacceptable answer. At one point, Annie looked around the table and said, This is the first meal I've had all week where nobody has mentioned shell companies. Monica pointed her fork at Ethan. No business tonight. Ethan lifted both hands. I didn't bring it up. You were thinking about it. That is difficult to prove. Annie laughed. After dinner, Monica cut the pie while Annie disappeared into her bedroom. She returned a few minutes later carrying an envelope. This is for you. Ethan took it. What is it? Read it later. That sounds suspicious. It isn't money. Monica smiled. Now you know how she feels. Ethan slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of his coat. He waited until he was back in the sedan before opening it. The note was handwritten. Mr. Whitmore, that night I thought I was only asking for one phone call. I didn't know the person answering me needed that call too. Thank you for stopping long enough to listen. Annie. Ethan read it twice. David glanced at him in the mirror. Everything all right, sir? Yes. Ethan folded the note along its original crease and returned it to the envelope. Everything's fine. 3 nights later, Monica and Annie came home shortly after 10 and found their apartment door partly open. Monica stopped immediately. Annie nearly walked into her. Mom? Stay here. The lock plate was damaged. Monica took Annie by the arm and backed her toward the stairwell. Don't touch the door. Annie's face changed. Someone's inside? I don't know. Monica called the police from the hallway while a neighbor came out after hearing their voices. They waited downstairs until officers arrived. Nothing valuable seemed missing at first. The television was still there. The small jewelry box in Monica's bedroom had not been touched. The jar where she kept emergency cash remained behind the flour container in the kitchen. But Annie's laptop was gone. So was the flash drive containing scanned tenant complaints. A drawer containing photocopies of Whitmore relocation notices had been emptied. Monica stood near the kitchen table as one of the officers took notes. They knew what they wanted. Annie hugged her arms against herself. The torn shoulder of her old work jacket had already been repaired. But for the first time since the robbery, she felt the same helplessness she had felt on that Chicago sidewalk. Someone had entered the place where she slept. Someone had gone through the papers she and her mother had collected. They took my school files too, Annie said. Monica turned. They were on the laptop. We can replace those. I know. Annie swallowed. She was tired of hearing that things could be replaced. Her wallet could be replaced. Her phone could be replaced. A laptop could be replaced. But every time someone took something, the world seemed to become a little smaller. Ethan arrived less than 40 minutes later with Samuel. He walked through the apartment with one of the officers, then returned to the kitchen. This wasn't random. Monica crossed her arms. I figured that out. You're both coming to Lake Forest tonight. No. Ethan looked at her. Monica, I am not running out of my own home because somebody wants me frightened. This is not about being brave. That's easy to say when it isn't your home. Ethan lowered his voice. Someone came into your apartment and ignored cash, jewelry, and electronics, except the computer containing evidence connected to my company. I understand what happened, then understand the next part. Whoever did this may come back. Monica's jaw tightened. Ethan continued. You don't have to stay forever. Stay until we know who's behind it. I have work. We'll deal with transportation. I don't need you arranging my entire life. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to keep arguing with me. Annie almost smiled, but the fear would not let her. Monica shook her head again. No, Mum. Monica turned. Annie's voice was quieter now. I want to go. Her mother's expression softened. Annie, I'm not scared for me. Monica waited. I'm scared they're going to hurt you because of what we found. That changed everything. Annie stepped closer. I can replace my laptop. I can redo the applications. I can replace my phone again if I have to. Her eyes filled. But I can't replace you. Monica looked away for a second, then reached for her daughter's hand. When she turned back to Ethan, the argument was over. How long? A few days. Monica nodded reluctantly. A few days. An hour later, they left the building with 2 overnight bags. Across the city, Martin Hale received a message from Frank Dwyer. They're inside Whitmore's house. Martin read it once before setting his phone down. Bringing Monica and Annie behind Ethan's gates had not made them harder to reach. It had simply placed every person Ethan cared about under the same roof. The gates at Lake Forest opened a little after midnight. Monica sat beside Annie in the back of the sedan, watching the long driveway curve through dark trees toward Ethan's house. Annie had been quiet for most of the ride. She kept one hand on the strap of her overnight bag, and the other around the repaired sleeve of her jacket, as if holding on to familiar things could make the night feel normal. When the car stopped, Ethan got out first. You don't have to carry anything, he said. Monica opened her door. I can carry a bag. I know. Then don't start treating me like I'm 90. Ethan stepped aside. I was being polite. You were being controlling in a polite voice. Annie looked between them and gave a tired smile. This should be a fun few days. Ethan took one of the bags anyway. Inside, Mrs. Alvarez was waiting near the kitchen in a robe and cardigan. She had worked for Ethan for 11 years and asked no unnecessary questions. I put fresh towels in the guest suite, she said. There's soup in the refrigerator if anyone is hungry. Monica shook her head. You didn't have to stay up. Mrs. Alvarez gave her a practical look. People are coming into this house after midnight because someone broke into their apartment. I was not going to leave cold food and a note. That ended the argument. The guest suite was larger than Monica's entire living room. Annie set her bag beside the bed and turned slowly, taking in the fireplace, the armchair by the window, and the bathroom with 2 sinks. Mum, I see it. There are 3 pillows just for decoration. Don't touch them. Why? Because I don't know what rich people do with decorative pillows. From the hallway, Ethan said, Nothing. That's why they're decorative. Annie laughed for the first time since finding the apartment door open. Monica gave Ethan a look. You were listening? This is my hallway. Apparently that means yes. The next morning, Monica woke before 6 out of habit. She found the kitchen and started coffee before Mrs. Alvarez arrived. When Ethan came downstairs at 6:15, he stopped near the doorway. You know someone gets paid to do that. Monica poured coffee into a mug. And I know how to make coffee. You're a guest. I'm awake. He looked at the pot. Is that for everyone? No. I made an entire pot because I planned to drink 12 cups. Ethan opened the cabinet for a mug. That sounded sarcastic. You'll survive. By 7, Annie appeared wearing sweatpants and an old university sweatshirt Monica had bought secondhand years earlier. She opened a cabinet, found cereal, and placed the box on the counter. Can I eat this? Ethan looked at her. You're asking permission to eat cereal? I don't know the rules here. The rule is if you're hungry, eat. Good rule. She poured a bowl, then left the cabinet door open. Monica closed it behind her. You do that at home too. I was coming back. You always say that. Ethan watched them without joining in. The kitchen had sounded different for years. Usually there was the coffee machine, the refrigerator motor, Mrs. Alvarez asking whether he wanted breakfast. That morning there were spoons against bowls, Monica reminding Annie not to leave milk on the counter, and Annie arguing that 5 minutes did not count as leaving it out. The change should have bothered him. It didn't. By late morning, Samuel and 2 auditors arrived. They worked in the library while Monica reviewed names from the tenant files. Annie settled at the desk Ethan had cleared for her and opened a replacement laptop. Samuel had arranged through the audit team. Temporary, Annie told Ethan when he noticed it. I didn't say anything. You were thinking something. That accusation seems to run in your family. Monica called from the next room. Usually because we're right. The audit had become more serious. Several vendor payments now connected to addresses that did not exist. One relocation fund appeared to have been split among 3 companies on the same day. Samuel said they were close to having enough evidence to take outside the company. Ethan understood what that meant. Once the records left Whitmore Holdings, there would be no quiet internal solution. Government investigators, lawyers, boards, lenders, newspapers, everyone would eventually know. He was reading one of the payment records when the front door opened. Martin Hale entered carrying a leather portfolio. Mrs. Alvarez announced him before he reached the library. Ethan looked up. Martin, I called. My phone's been off. Martin stepped inside and saw Monica first. Then Annie. His expression did not change. Mrs. Reed, Mr. Hale. Annie gave a polite nod. Martin noticed the laptop, the open college forms, the coffee mug beside Annie, and the stack of audit papers on the table. His eyes moved through each detail without staying on any one of them for long. I didn't realize you had company. They're staying here for a few days. Martin looked at Ethan. Because of the break-in? Yes. I heard. Monica looked at him. From who? Corporate security keeps me informed when an investigation touches company documents. The answer sounded reasonable. That was what made Monica uncomfortable. Martin placed the portfolio on Ethan's desk. I brought the revised financing package for the Western properties. It can wait. Martin glanced at the clock. We have the lenders at 3. Move it. To tomorrow? Yes. Martin looked at Ethan for a moment. You never move lender calls. I just did. Martin gave a small nod. All right. He stayed another 20 minutes discussing work. Nothing in his tone suggested anger. Nothing in his questions sounded unusual. But when Annie asked Ethan whether he still planned to drive her to the community college information session that afternoon, Martin looked at him again. You're going? Ethan closed the folder in front of him. I said I would. Martin leaned against the edge of the desk. We still have 3 open items from yesterday. We'll finish tomorrow. For a moment, something unreadable crossed Martin's face. Then it was gone. Tomorrow, then. After Martin left, Monica watched the front door close. I don't like him. Ethan turned. You've met him twice. That was enough. Samuel looked up from his papers. Reason? Monica thought about it. He asks questions like he already knows the answers. Ethan almost dismissed the comment, but Samuel did not. He wrote something in his notebook. That evening, after the college session, Annie returned to the house carrying a folder full of financial aid information. She passed the hallway leading toward Emily's room and noticed the door again. Still closed. Ethan was behind her. This time, his voice was different. Annie. She turned. He reached into his pocket and removed a small key. For a few seconds he looked at it, then at the door. I think I'm going to open it. Annie did not move closer. Do you want me to come with you? Ethan considered the question. No. She nodded. Okay. He unlocked the door. Annie continued down the hallway without looking back. Ethan stood there alone, one hand on the handle. Then he opened the door. The air inside carried the faint smell of books and cedar from a closet that had not been disturbed in years. A high school pennant still hung over the desk. A jacket remained on the back of a chair. A photograph of Rachel and Emily sat beside a lamp. Ethan stepped inside. He did not change anything. He did not pack anything away. He simply stood there until the room stopped feeling like a place he was forbidden to enter. When he came out several minutes later, he closed the door behind him, but he did not lock it. Downstairs, Martin Hale was receiving a message from Frank Dwyer. Security rotations attached. Martin opened the file and studied the schedule. Then he sent only 2 words. Tomorrow night. Monica woke sometime after 2 with the dry mouth that came from too much coffee and too little sleep. She checked the clock, pulled on a cardigan, and went to the bathroom for water. On her way back, she heard Annie shift under the blankets and murmur something she could not understand. You okay? Monica whispered. Annie opened her eyes halfway. My head hurts, probably from staring at financial aid forms for 6 hours. Worth it. Stay there. I'll find you something. Mrs. Alvarez had shown Monica where the basic medicine was kept in a cabinet near the service corridor downstairs. Monica slipped into soft shoes and headed toward the back stairs so she would not wake anyone. The house felt different at that hour. During the day, there were phones, footsteps, doors opening. Mrs. Alvarez, moving between rooms. Now Monica could hear the heating system starting and stopping behind the walls and the occasional scrape of branches outside. She reached the service level and was halfway toward the cabinet when she heard a man speaking. At first she assumed it was one of the security guards. Then she recognized Martin Hale. His voice came from a maintenance room near the rear corridor. Tomorrow. Monica slowed. A second later Martin spoke again. No. Send the security team downtown first. She stopped. Her hand remained on the edge of the cabinet. There was a pause while whoever was on the other end answered. Martin's next sentence removed every doubt. The girl is the leverage. Monica felt the cold before she understood why. She moved closer to the wall without meaning to. Martin continued, Ethan will sign anything if Annie is standing on the other side of a gun. Monica's fingers tightened around the cabinet handle. For a second she could not make her legs move. Then instinct took over. Get back upstairs. Get Annie. Wake Ethan. She took one careful step away from the corridor. Then another. The sole of her shoe touched the metal edge of a floor vent. A faint click sounded. Martin stopped speaking. Monica moved faster. She had nearly reached the corner when his voice came from behind her. Monica. She turned. Martin stood at the entrance to the maintenance room with his jacket folded over one arm. No phone was visible. His expression gave her nothing to work with. What are you doing down here? Annie has a headache. At 2 a.m? Headaches don't check the clock. Martin gave a short smile. No, I suppose they don't. Monica kept her breathing even. The medicine cabinet is right there. I see it. He did not move aside. Then he asked, "How long have you been standing here?" "I just got here." Martin watched her face. Monica knew immediately that he did not believe her. She also knew he understood that she knew. Neither said it. Finally, Martin moved away from the doorway. "You should get back to your daughter." "I plan to. Young women shouldn't be left alone at night." Monica felt the threat beneath the courtesy. She met his eyes. "No, they shouldn't." Then she walked past him. She did not hurry until she reached the stairs. Back in the guest suite, Annie pushed herself upright when Monica entered. "Did you find anything?" Monica locked the door. Annie's expression changed. "Mom? Get dressed." "What happened?" Quietly. "Why?" Monica crossed the room and took Annie's phone from the nightstand. No signal. She tried her own. Nothing. "That's weird," Annie said. "Mine was working an hour ago." Monica looked toward the door. "We need Ethan. Did someone say something to you?" "I'll tell you when we're with him." Annie was fully awake now. Monica gave her 2 tablets and waited until she swallowed them. "Shoes on. Keep your jacket close." "Mom, you're scaring me." "I know." Monica touched her face. "But I need you to trust me." Annie nodded. At breakfast, Ethan was already speaking with Martin when Monica entered the kitchen. She almost stopped. Martin sat at the island with a folder open in front of him. Ethan had coffee in one hand and several printed photographs in the other. Martin looked toward Monica. "Good morning." She forced herself to answer. "Morning." Ethan noticed her expression. "You all right? I need to talk to you." Martin closed the folder. Ethan said, "Give us a minute." Before Martin could move, a security officer appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Whitmore, we have a situation." Ethan turned. "What?" The officer handed him a tablet. "South Warehouse. Possible coordinated intrusion tonight. 3 vehicles have been identified near the property over the last 12 hours. Martin spoke before Monica could. "That's what I came to tell you." Ethan looked at him. "You knew?" "Dwyer called me at 5:30. Monica's stomach tightened. Martin opened his folder again. License plates, radio logs, photographs. "If they're planning to hit the warehouse, they're not after inventory. That location stores archived contract records." Samuel had told Monica only the previous day that archived records could become important evidence. The story had been built carefully. Ethan examined the photographs. "How many men are there now?" 8 on site, the security officer said. "That isn't enough." Martin nodded. "I'd send at least 20 from here." Monica stepped forward. "Ethan." He looked at her. Martin did too. "I really need to speak with you." Ethan saw something in her face. "Now?" "Yes." Martin's phone rang. He checked the screen. "Dwyer." He answered and immediately put it on speaker. Frank's voice came through. "We've got movement. One of the vehicles just left the staging point." Ethan swore under his breath. "Send the team." Monica's heart dropped. "Ethan, wait." He looked at her. "What is it?" Martin turned toward her with an expression of concern so convincing that Monica almost hated him for it. She opened her mouth. A house employee entered from the hall. "Mr. Whitmore, one of the security panels is showing a service fault." Martin was already moving. "I'll check it." "No," Monica said. Everyone looked at her. She tried to decide how much she could say without knowing which guards Martin controlled. Ethan stepped closer. "Monica?" Martin stopped near the doorway. For 1 second their eyes met. The warning was there. Monica changed course. "I need you to come upstairs when you're done." Ethan looked confused. "I will." Martin smiled faintly. By 10, 3 black security SUVs had left the Lake Forest property. Monica watched them through an upstairs window. Annie stood beside her. "Are you going to tell me what's happening now?" Monica was about to answer when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the guest wing went dark. Annie turned toward the hallway. "Mom?" Monica looked through the window again. Near the inner drive, a security guard she had never seen before had taken the position normally occupied by a man named Luis. Then, beyond him, the south service gate began to open. Monica understood all of it at once. The warehouse report, the missing phone signal, Martin downstairs at 2 in the morning, the security team leaving. She grabbed Annie's hand. The warehouse was never the target. Annie looked at her. Monica pulled her away from the window. "You were." Monica did not give Annie time to argue. She pulled her away from the window and toward the back of the guest suite, where a narrow service door connected to the hallway used by house staff. "Shoes on," Monica said. "Take your jacket and nothing else." Annie reached for her bag. "Leave it." "My laptop." Leave it. The urgency in Monica's voice ended the discussion. Annie slipped into her shoes and followed her mother into the service corridor. The lights there had gone out too, but pale emergency strips near the floor still worked. Monica remembered the layout misses. Alvarez had shown her the first night. Laundry room to the left, kitchen stairs ahead, storage beyond the second turn. "What did you hear last night?" Annie whispered. "Martin was talking to someone." "About me?" "Yes." Annie stopped for half a second. Monica tightened her grip on her hand. "Keep moving." "What did he say?" "That he planned to use you to force Ethan to do something." Annie's breathing changed. "Mom, I know. I thought you said we were safe here." "I thought we were." They heard a door open somewhere below. Then footsteps. Not rushed. That made Monica more afraid. Whoever had entered the house knew where they were going. She guided Annie through the next turn and pushed open a small linen closet. Inside, Annie looked at the shelves. "You're coming too. I need to find Ethan." "No." "Annie, no. You told me not to leave you. I told you to survive for me. That doesn't mean I hide while you go looking for people with guns." Monica pressed her lips together. She knew arguing would cost time. "Fine, we stay together." They continued toward the back stairs. At that same moment, Ethan was 10 miles from the warehouse when Samuel called. "Turn around." Ethan sat forward in the sedan. "What happened?" "I had one of the technical people compare the security photos Martin gave you with the warehouse camera system. And? The timestamps don't match." Ethan's voice hardened. "How far off?" "Hours." Ethan looked at David. "Turn around. Now." David changed lanes immediately. Samuel continued. "There's more. One of the license plates in the report belongs to a company vehicle that was in Wisconsin yesterday." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Where's Martin?" "I don't know." "Find out." "Ethan, if this was designed to pull security away from the house." "I know." He ended the call and dialed Monica. "No connection." "Annie." "No connection." "The house." "Nothing." Ethan tried the main security line. "Dead." He called David's backup number and handed him the phone. "Keep trying Lake Forest." David looked at him through the mirror. "You want police?" "Yes. Tell them there may be an armed security breach at the residence." Ethan looked out at the highway ahead. For 4 years he had lived without fearing that anyone could be taken from him because the people he loved were already gone. Now every mile between him and the house felt intolerable. Back inside Lake Forest, Monica and Annie reached the lower service hallway. The kitchen door was ahead. A man's voice came from the other side. "Check upstairs." Annie froze. Monica pulled her into an alcove beside the pantry. 2 men passed through the kitchen. One wore a security jacket. The other did not. Annie waited until their footsteps faded. "That guy works here?" "I don't know. You said you saw a different guard outside." "Yes." "So Martin changed people before the power went out." Monica nodded. Annie's face tightened. "This was planned for days." "Probably." "What does he want Ethan to sign?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, he needs Ethan alive." Monica looked at her daughter. "And he thinks he needs you frightened." Annie swallowed. "That's not comforting." "It wasn't meant to be." They moved again. At the far end of the hallway, Annie noticed a red metal box mounted beside a security alcove. She had seen it before. Ethan had pointed it out the first afternoon they stayed there after Annie asked why the house still had old wall phones. "Emergency line. Works even when the regular network doesn't." Annie touched Monica's arm. "There." Monica followed her gaze. "Can you call out?" "I think so." "You think?" "Ethan showed me." Another voice sounded from upstairs. They were getting closer. Monica whispered, "Go." Annie moved quickly to the alcove and lifted the red receiver. Nothing happened for 1 second. Then she heard a dial tone. Her knees nearly weakened with relief. She pressed 911. The dispatcher answered, 911. "What's your emergency?" Annie lowered her voice. "My name is Annie Reed. I'm at the Whitmore residence in Lake Forest. There are armed men inside the house." The dispatcher's tone changed at once. "Are you in a safe location?" "No." "Are you alone?" "My mother is with me." "Do you know how many intruders there are?" "At least 2, maybe more. Some of them may be wearing security uniforms." Monica kept watch at the corner. Annie gave the address. The dispatcher repeated it. "Police are already being notified about a possible security breach at that location." Annie looked at Monica. "Ethan must have called." "Good." The dispatcher continued. Can you stay on the line? Annie heard another door open nearby. She lowered her voice further. I can't talk. That's okay. Don't hang up. Leave the line open if you can. Annie looked at the receiver. She remembered the first night she met Ethan, standing several feet from his sedan because she was afraid he would leave before she could reach her mother. That night, she had needed a stranger to make the call. Tonight, nobody was going to make it for her. I'm leaving it open, Annie whispered. She placed the receiver gently on the shelf without disconnecting it. The dispatcher could still hear whatever happened nearby. Monica took Annie's hand. Come on. They had gone only a few yards when someone stepped into the far end of the corridor. Frank Dwyer. He looked first at Monica, then at Annie. There you are. Monica moved in front of her daughter. Dwyer gave a small shake of his head. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Annie's eyes flicked toward the red phone behind them. The line was still open. Somewhere on the other end, someone was listening. Monica squeezed Annie's hand once. Neither of them spoke. Dwyer took another step, and Annie understood that the second phone call of her life that truly mattered had already done what it needed to do. Dwyer stopped several yards away, blocking the only clear path out of the service corridor. Monica kept herself between him and Annie. What do you want? Dwyer glanced past them toward the red emergency phone. The receiver rested on the shelf exactly where Annie had left it. But from his angle, there was no obvious sign that the line was still connected. I need both of you upstairs. We're not going anywhere with you. That isn't really your decision. Monica's hand tightened around Annie's fingers. Dwyer reached inside his jacket. Annie stiffened. He did not pull anything out. He only let them understand what might be there. Mrs. Reed, Martin asked me to bring you to the conservatory. I'd prefer to do it without making this worse. Annie whispered. Mom, I know. Monica looked at Dwyer. If Martin wants to talk, he can come down here. Dwyer gave a short breath through his nose. You still think this is a conversation? Two men appeared behind him. One was the unfamiliar guard Monica had seen near the driveway. The other wore dark clothes with no company insignia. Monica counted quickly. 3 here, possibly more upstairs. Running would only separate her from Annie. She made the decision she hated most. We'll walk. Dwyer stepped aside. Good choice. Monica turned her head toward Annie as they moved. Stay next to me. Annie nodded. They passed the emergency alcove without looking toward it. The 911 line remained open. Upstairs, the house looked almost normal except for the missing lights in the guest wing and the unfamiliar men positioned near the entrances. Backup lamps cast enough light to move through the main floor. When they reached the conservatory, Martin Hale was waiting. A long table had been moved near the windows. On it sat several folders, a laptop, and a stack of legal documents marked with yellow tabs. Martin looked at Monica first. I was hoping you'd make this easier. You threatened my daughter. I identified what Ethan values. That's how you explain it to yourself? Martin turned toward Annie. You've had an unusual couple of weeks. Annie moved closer to her mother. You mean since people connected to you broke into our apartment? Martin's expression barely changed. Be careful with accusations. Annie almost laughed. You brought armed men into Ethan's house and you're worried about accusations? Dwyer stepped forward. Martin lifted one hand. Leave her. Annie noticed it then. Martin was not angry. He was confident. That frightened her more. He believed everything was already decided. Martin checked his watch. Ethan should be here soon. Monica frowned. You sent him to the warehouse so you could bring him back? I sent him away so I could control the conditions when he returned. You knew he'd figure it out. Eventually. Then what was the point? Martin tapped the documents. To make sure everyone important was in the same place when he did. Annie looked at the yellow tabs. What are those? Martin smiled faintly. Adult paperwork. I can read. I'm sure you can. Monica's voice hardened. Answer her. Martin looked at the first page. Voting control. Emergency executive authority. A suspension of the independent audit. Withdrawal of certain records from outside review. Monica understood. You're stealing the company. I'm preventing Ethan from destroying it. By threatening people? By using leverage. Annie looked at him. You keep calling people leverage. Martin met her eyes. That's what people are when someone else cares about them. A car engine sounded outside. Then tires on the drive. Martin looked toward the windows. Right on time. Ethan had called police again before the sedan reached the property. David slowed near the outer gate. It's open, he said. It shouldn't be. Ethan looked toward the guard station. No Louis. No regular night supervisor. Don't drive to the front entrance. David glanced at him. Service side? Stop near the east path. Keep the engine running. What about you? If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you leave and meet the police. David turned toward him. Sir, that's not a suggestion. Ethan stepped out before David could argue. He entered through a side door that should have been locked. That told him enough. Someone with internal access had opened the house. He moved through the hallway, heard voices near the conservatory, and stopped before entering. Martin, Monica, Annie, then Dwyer. Ethan took out his phone, sent Samuel one message with his location, and activated the emergency alert connected to the security company. Only then did he step through the doorway. Martin turned. Ethan. Monica's shoulders dropped for half a second. Annie whispered, "Thank God." Ethan's eyes moved over both women, checking quickly for injuries. Then he looked at Martin. "What did you do?" Martin nodded toward the table. "I gave you a way out. You falsified the warehouse threat." "Yes." "You cut communications." "Yes." "You sent my security team away." "Technically, you did." Ethan took one step forward. Dwyer shifted position. Martin raised a hand. "Don't." Ethan stopped. Martin pointed toward the documents. "Sit down." "No. Read first." "I know what they are. Then this will go faster." Ethan looked at Annie, then Monica. Martin followed his gaze. "That's the difference between now and 4 years ago." Ethan turned back to him. Martin continued. "Back then, I couldn't pressure you. You didn't care what happened to you. You worked, you slept a few hours, and you came back. There was nothing anyone could threaten." His eyes moved toward Annie. "Then one frightened young woman asked you for a phone call." Annie felt Monica's hand find hers again. Martin gave a small shake of his head, and suddenly Ethan Whitmore had something to lose. Ethan's expression changed, but his voice remained controlled. "You think that makes me weaker?" "I know it does." "No." Martin waited. Ethan looked at Monica, the woman who had once helped him when she had almost nothing herself. Then at Annie, who had asked for no money, no favors, only a way to let her mother know she was safe. "They didn't make me weak." He turned back to Martin. "They reminded me why strength matters." Martin pushed a pen across the table. "Beautiful. Now sign." Ethan did not move. Martin's patience thinned. "Voting control first. Then the audit termination. After that, they walk out with you. And if I refuse?" Martin looked toward Annie. He did not need to say more. Annie felt fear rise in her chest, but another thought came with it. The emergency phone downstairs. The receiver was still off the hook. The dispatcher might still be listening. Martin believed the house had been cut off from everyone outside. He did not know that one line had survived. Annie looked at the papers again, then at Martin. She needed him talking, so she asked the first question that came to her. "You did all of this just to get Ethan's company?" Martin turned toward her, and Annie understood from the way he smiled that his pride might be the one thing in the house more dangerous than his plan. "You did all of this just to get Ethan's company?" Annie asked. Martin turned toward her as if the question amused him. "His company?" He gave a small shake of his head. "You still think this is about one company?" Ethan's attention shifted to Annie for only a second. He understood what she was doing almost immediately. She was buying time, and he had no idea why. He only knew better than to interrupt her. Annie looked at the documents on the table. "Then explain it." Martin smiled. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." Dwyer glanced toward Martin. "We don't have time for this." "We have enough." Martin looked at Annie again. "Whitmore Holdings controls land, contracts, development rights, financing. Ethan built the machine. But he never understood how much power came from deciding which neighborhoods receive investment and which ones become too expensive for the people already living there." Monica felt Annie's fingers move slightly against hers. "Keep him talking." "So you pushed people out," Annie said. "I moved projects forward. You let buildings fall apart until people gave up. That is your interpretation. What do you call it?" Martin's expression sharpened. "Business." Monica stepped in. "Business doesn't require taking repair money and sending it through fake companies." Martin looked toward her. "Careful. You already brought us here. What exactly are you saving the Polite Act for?" Ethan kept his eyes on Martin. Martin tapped the papers in front of him. There were expenses, vendors, acquisitions, Nobody builds at this level without making decisions people at street level dislike, Annie asked. And the relocation money? Martin's eyes returned to her. What about it? People were approved for more than they received. You read some papers and now you think you understand redevelopment. I understand when money disappears. Dwyer took a step closer to her. Ethan reacted immediately. Back away from her. Dwyer stopped. Martin lifted the pen from the table and held it toward Ethan. Enough. Sign. Ethan did not take it. Annie spoke before Martin could press again. Was my neighborhood chosen because people there are black? Martin exhaled. No. Then why were the worst buildings in neighborhoods like ours? Because property values created opportunity. That wasn't my question. Martin looked irritated now. Annie pressed. You wrote that people there didn't have political leverage. Ethan watched Martin's face. That email had never been released outside the audit team. Annie knew exactly where to push. Martin said, because it was true, Monica asked. And you thought people without money couldn't fight you. Martin turned toward her. People with money fight back. People with lawyers fight back. People with political connections fight back. His mouth tightened. People like your neighborhood usually don't. Annie's pulse jumped. There it was. She kept her voice steady enough to continue. You mean people you thought nobody important would listen to? Exactly. Martin answered too quickly. For the first time, Ethan saw the mistake register in his face. Not because Martin knew about the open emergency line, because he realized he had said too much in front of Ethan. Martin pushed the papers toward him. Sign. Ethan finally moved to the table. He picked up the pen. Monica looked at him. Annie understood. He was buying time, too. Ethan opened the first document and began reading. Martin's patience broke. You know what it says. I never sign something I haven't read. You've signed hundreds of documents I prepared. That was before tonight. Dwyer walked toward the windows and looked outside. Nothing yet. Martin said, You're stalling. Ethan continued reading, then stopped talking. Annie almost smiled despite the fear pressing against her chest. Then, far beyond the house, a sound reached them. A siren. Dwyer turned. Martin looked toward the windows. Another siren followed. Then another. His face changed. Frank. Dwyer moved quickly toward the hallway. Annie's eyes went toward the service corridor. Martin followed her glance. He understood. The emergency line. Annie said nothing. Martin looked at her. You called. She held his eyes. Yes. Everything happened at once. Dwyer grabbed Annie's arm and tried to pull her away from Monica. Don't touch her, Monica shouted. She struck his forearm with the heavy wooden document box from the edge of the table. His grip broke. Annie stumbled sideways but stayed on her feet. Ethan moved between her and Dwyer. Martin backed toward the conservatory doors. Outside, blue lights flashed against the trees. One of the men near the entrance shouted that police were at the south drive. Move, Martin yelled. Dwyer rushed toward the side exit. 2 officers entered from the main hall with security personnel behind them. Hands where we can see them. Dwyer stopped. Martin did not. He pushed through the conservatory doors and ran toward the rear terrace. Ethan followed. Ethan, Monica called. He kept going. Martin reached the stone steps near the lawn and turned sharply. For the first time that night, he looked afraid. You're throwing away everything we built. You threw it away. I protected it. You stole from it. I made it stronger. You made it yours. Martin stepped closer. You think those people care about you now? You think Monica does? Annie? You have money. That's why everyone eventually comes close. Ethan's expression hardened. Not everyone. Martin glanced toward the house, calculating distance. Then he lunged past Ethan. Ethan caught his arm. They struggled briefly near the terrace railing. Martin's handgun slipped from inside his jacket and struck the stone between them. Both men saw it. Ethan reached it first. He picked it up and pointed it at Martin. Martin stopped. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Martin gave a bitter smile. There he is. Ethan's grip tightened. The old Ethan. Martin took a slow step forward. The one who didn't hesitate. Ethan thought of Rachel. Emily. 4 years of waking before sunrise because work was easier than memory. Then Monica sitting across from him with coffee, refusing his money. Annie standing beside a sedan asking only for one phone call. Martin said, the old Ethan would have finished this. Ethan looked at the weapon in his hand, then at Martin. The old Ethan had nothing worth becoming better for. He lowered it. Police officers reached the terrace seconds later. On your knees. Martin looked at Ethan as if he still expected him to change his mind. He did not. The officers took Martin into custody. When Ethan returned inside, Annie was standing beside Monica, while an officer spoke with Dwyer across the room. Annie saw Ethan and crossed the distance between them. Are you okay? He nodded. So are you. She gave a weak laugh. Mostly. Monica approached. Ethan looked at both of them, then toward the red emergency phone visible through the service corridor. You kept the line open. Annie nodded. You told me once emergency phones still matter. Ethan looked at her. Apparently they do. Outside, police lights washed across the front of the house. The danger had ended. But by morning, every document Martin tried to bury would begin speaking for the people he had spent years assuming nobody would hear. By sunrise, the Lake Forest house had become a place of interviews, evidence bags, phone calls, and people moving between the conservatory and the service corridor with notebooks in their hands. Annie sat beside Monica at the kitchen table while a detective finished taking her statement. The hot chocolate Mrs. Alvarez had made for her had gone cold, but Annie kept both hands around the mug. Ethan stood near the window speaking with Samuel. The 911 recording caught most of it, Samuel said. Martin talking about the neighborhoods, the pressure tactics, the documents he wanted you to sign. Dwyer's name is on enough internal records to keep investigators busy for months. Ethan looked toward Annie. She knew what she was doing. She did. Samuel closed his notebook. So did Monica. I know. You should tell them. Ethan looked at him. I intend to. Samuel studied his face. And the company? Ethan turned back toward the window. We stopped pretending this was one bad executive. Samuel nodded slightly. That's the right answer. It's also the expensive one. The right answer usually is. Within 48 hours, the independent audit was turned over to state and federal investigators. Martin Hale, Frank Dwyer, and several people connected to the shell companies faced charges tied to fraud, conspiracy, coercion, evidence tampering, and the events at Lake Forest. Whitmore Holdings hired outside counsel to review every redevelopment project Martin had touched. Ethan refused to let the company release the first statement its public relations team prepared. He read the draft once, then pushed it back across the conference table. Mistakes were made? The communications director shifted in her chair. It keeps the language neutral until the investigation is complete. Neutral for whom? For the company. Ethan looked around the table. That's the problem. 3 days later, he stood in the same church basement where residents had first handed him their folders. There were no banners behind him, no company photographer, no stage. Mr. Carter sat in the first row with his cane between his knees. Mrs. Jenkins sat beside him. Monica and Annie stood near the coffee table. Ethan faced the people his company had spent years addressing through letters. Martin Hale committed crimes, he began. Frank Dwyer helped him. Investigators will determine the full extent of what they did. He paused. But some of those things happened under my name while I wasn't paying enough attention. A few people shifted in their chairs. Ethan continued. I can tell you I didn't know. That's true. He looked toward the Whitmore redevelopment notice still pinned to the community board. But not knowing explains my failure. It does not erase it. Nobody applauded. Ethan had not expected them to. Mr. Carter raised his hand. So what happens to us? That's what matters next. Ethan explained that all active displacement deadlines connected to the investigation had been suspended. Independent tenant counsel would be paid through a fund Whitmore Holdings could not control. Previous relocation cases would be reopened. Residents who had lost money because of fraudulent practices would be compensated once claims were verified. The building Monica lived in would not be demolished. Instead, the company would fund overdue repairs, while ownership was restructured through a community land trust with resident representation. Mrs. Jenkins lifted her hand. So 5 years from now, some other executive can't decide our block is worth more without us? That's the point. An older man near the aisle spoke next. Justice shouldn't depend on whether somebody powerful happens to know your name. Ethan looked at him. No, he said. It shouldn't. That sentence became the standard he used over the following months. An independent complaint office was created outside the normal corporate chain. Tenant representatives gained direct access to redevelopment reviews. Security complaints no longer disappeared inside Dwyer's old department. Several managers who had ignored warnings were removed. while others who had tried to report problems were brought back. None of it happened quickly enough for everyone. Ethan learned that fixing a system took longer than exposing the person who abused it. Monica reminded him of that whenever he became impatient. "You spent years building the wrong habits," she told him one afternoon. "You don't undo them before dinner." He looked at her over his coffee. "You're enjoying this? Watching you learn patience?" "Yes, a little." A month after Martin's arrest, Ethan met Monica outside her apartment building. Workers were replacing windows on the upper floors, and a new heating system was being installed in the basement. He handed her an envelope. She did not take it. "What is that?" "A check." "No. You haven't even asked how much." "That is exactly why the answer is no." "Monica." She folded her arms. "Ethan, if this is about $40 from 28 years ago, I am going home." "It's not $40. I assumed inflation had occurred." Despite himself, he smiled. "I've spent most of my life thinking I owed you." Monica's expression softened. "You don't. You helped me when you had almost nothing. There was a hungry young man sitting in my section. I fed him. You gave me money you needed. And I told you what to do with it. Pay it forward." "Exactly." Ethan looked down at the envelope. Monica continued, "It was never about $40. I helped you because you needed help. The only thing I ever hoped was that if life treated you kindly one day, you'd remember what kindness looked like." Ethan met her eyes. "Did I?" Monica considered him for a moment. Eventually, he laughed and put the envelope back into his coat. 1 year later, Annie walked out of her evening anatomy class carrying 2 textbooks and a nursing fundamentals workbook against her chest. A familiar black sedan waited at the curb. Monica sat in the front passenger seat. Ethan stood beside the rear door. Annie slowed. "You two are early." "Your mother worries," Ethan said. "She always worries." "I know." Annie reached the car, then stopped before opening the door. "Do you remember the first thing I ever asked you?" Ethan nodded. "You asked me to call your mother, and you almost said no." "I did say no. Good thing I asked twice." Ethan opened the door for her. "Good thing you did." Annie smiled and climbed inside. That evening, Ethan returned to his study and placed a new photograph beside the ones of Rachel and Emily. It showed Monica, Annie, and Ethan after Annie's first semester of nursing school. Nothing had been removed to make room for it. Beside the photograph was Annie's old handwritten note. He read the final line once more. "Sometimes one phone call doesn't just bring someone home. Sometimes it brings someone back to life." Ethan folded the note carefully and returned it to its place. Then, for the first time in years, he left the study door open when he walked away. The story reminds us that kindness is never wasted, even when its impact is invisible for years. A small act of compassion can return in ways no one expects. But true justice means more than repaying one person, it means changing the system so others are treated fairly too. Ethan learns that wealth cannot erase responsibility. Monica proves that dignity matters more than money. And Annie shows that courage can begin with something as simple as asking for help. In the end, the message is clear. Real strength is not having nothing to lose, but choosing to protect what is right, listen to those who are ignored, and use whatever power we have to make life fairer for someone else. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.